Well, welcome everybody to the first workshop of the Microsoft Power Platform Accelerator for Razor's Edge NXT. So a quick agenda for today, since we know most of you are, extreme power users of Razor's Edge and probably have been for a long time. Our past cohorts have told us that you spend most of your time in the database view. And you're not in the web view much. It might lack the features and controls that you need. You may prefer working in database view, particularly in batch and other GIF processing functions. So we need to orient you to all of the tools in your toolbox, and some of those are in RENXT web view. So we'll start there. Then we're going to do our first Power Platform live demonstration and orientation. We're going to be going over some of the key concepts that are going to ground us in the next several sessions. And we're going to give you a cheat sheet on how you can actually import flows and swap code. That's going to be an important component of the course. As we give you code after each session that you can use and incorporate and use for troubleshooting in your own projects. And then we're going to talk about projects and sort of ideate on what makes a good project beyond just looking at notifications, because I know that's on top of everybody's list. So that's how we're going to round out the 90 or so minutes we're together today. I think you all know me by now, Heather McLean, Principal Solution Architect here at Blackbaud. I predominantly serve our enterprise nonprofit space. I recently, became brave enough to call myself a citizen developer. I have been, I would say I'm a beginner to intermediate when it comes to low code, no code, getting better every day and getting braver every day. And let me introduce my partners in crime here for the Accelerator. Next up.
Hey everyone, I'm Trevor Kelly. I've been at Blackbaud for just over 10 years now, and I used to be a database manager and a programmer as a Razor's Edge customer before I started at Blackbaud. So my old job description used to involve writing VBA macros, writing crystal reports, doing a lot of things that I am grateful I no longer have to do. And I think part of what this course is going to help enable you all to do is to do some of those really cool things without hopefully having to write much, if any, code at all. And so that's really one of the benefits of these tools that we're going to be working through over the course of the next 7 weeks, is that you can make really cool things happen between your database with Razor's Edge and other applications that you might be using without really having to know how to program all that much.
Hey everybody, Jim Ballou. I am a Principal Solutions Architect at Blackbaud. I'm the old timer. I've been here since 1994. Working on Razor's Edge in all of its iterations. I'm specifically devoted to the higher education space, but I am here to support you and also to learn. I'm dipping my toes in on this. Way back in the day when we released RE7, those VBA macros that Trevor was talking about, I actually was the product support lead when we launched that. And so I wrote a bunch of sample code back then. By training, I'm an English major, not a programmer, but if I can pick this up, then everybody can pick this up. So really happy to be here today. I'm going to be doing a little bit more talking as we do our kind of overview of NXT, because there's some tips and tricks that we want to make sure that everybody's clear on, because it's going to help you as you think about how to tackle the problems that are on your plates right now.
Hello, everyone. Zaya Cuchuayo. I have been with Blackbaud for 10 years, but I worked in the nonprofit sector 8 years, starting as an annual fund manager, and then eventually became entrenched in Razor's Edge and overall structure. As a solutions engineer, my role is to listen to organizations like you all. What is your need, and help to identify those solutions. I'm in the foot of Trevor, where I'm coming from a nonprofit organization and learned a lot now with Blackbaud, but also in the place where Heather is, where I am low code, no code. So I'm more of the evangelist who sees the value of what we're offering here, and am excited to partner with you all.
Wonderful. Well, I know that many of you, if not all of you, were either at one of our orientations or have listened to what I'm sure was a riveting repeat performance in the video. But just to recenter ourselves, since today is workshop number 1, today we're going to be talking about Blackbaud and the Razor's Edge NXT connector specifically for the Microsoft Power Platform. So the Power Platform can do a great many things that we aren't going to touch on in this course, maybe tease out, but certainly not cover. The Microsoft Power Platform can work with other solutions that have nothing to do with Blackbaud and can automate business processes on your desktop and in Excel. But we're really going to focus on those projects and processes that involve Blackbaud and Razor's Edge NXT. So we will be covering in this course and spend most of our time in Power Automate. So building workflows that incorporate Razor's Edge NXT and maybe the rest of the Microsoft productivity stack, maybe some other applications as well, but really spending most of our time in Power Automate through the sessions. We will also touch on Power Apps. So Power Apps are a low-code, no-code, drag and drop interface for building experiences for either staff, right, and internal admins, or can be externally facing in some ways. But we will only really focus on the Power Apps in the context of how you can use Power Apps to initiate and trigger Power Automate workflows. We'll then sort of build on the Power Apps sequence and then teach you how to embed a Power App within a Sky add-in tile. All right. Well, then, without further ado, I think up next we're going to get into our RENXT boot camp led by old timer here, Jim Ballou.
Thanks, Heather. So what we're going to do, and this may be review for a lot of you. I wanted to make sure that everyone had a solid grounding in what's actually going on in the web view of Razor's Edge. Heather mentioned about database view and web view. Obviously, I can alt tab between those. There's my record in database view. If I want to get it to it here, I can do so. It's the same data, right? But when we're talking about the advanced functionality that Blackbaud has released for the Power Platform connector, it's actually predicated on the APIs that exist around Razor's Edge NXT, meaning the web view. So when you think about the projects that are on your plate right now, you're thinking, well, how do I get more data out of the system, or how do I get data into the system? How do I draw attention to something that's special, unique to my organization? It's handy to kind of understand what's already in the product. And this isn't intended to be a demo. I do those all the time. So I'll ask your indulgence if I slip into sales speak here. But there are some features and there's some concepts that I want everyone to be comfortable with. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is a work center. This is an area that we built for fundraisers. And a lot of the examples that customers have come to us over the past several months where they want to kind of enhance functionality, it's around fundraisers, right? So when you think about what your gift officers are doing, you may have gift officers who don't actually go into the product because they just don't want to. What I wanted to show you just real quick is some of the features that are native. You don't have to build any of this stuff because it already exists. It may be a process of actually just convincing a user to give it a try. And again, that's like leading a horse to water, understand. But when you look at this work center from a fundraiser's perspective, this is built to kind of give them everything at their fingertips. They've got their entire portfolio at one click away. They've got their tickler right here. And if I want to drill in on anything, I can do so. So if I see I've got a past due activity, one click, It's going to take me to a screen that Blackbaud built to allow that user who has this past due activity to take care of it, right? So I was supposed to have a stewardship report out of the Cypress Foundation yesterday. Okay, fair enough. If I want to take care of that, I can manage those actions here. So there are a lot of things like that built into the use of the Razor's Edge. I'm going to show you another example. One of the #1 projects that we had when we first started this program, this was several class sessions ago, was the idea of generating receipts, re-receipting a gift. So you should know by now that Blackbaud has a receipt manager tool that essentially is going to generate standardized gift receipts when gifts are entered in the system. That gift receipt process is built to be automated, but the use case was, hey, somebody lost their receipt, right? Or, I have a donor called in and said, hey, I don't remember receiving this. Can you send this to me again? Well, the process here is built for the first receipt. And we had people who said, hey, I want to build a Power Automate workflow, which allows me through a custom add-in on a gift record to regenerate that receipt. Well, that's something that Blackbaud actually released as a standard feature. So I just jumped over to a specific gift that had already been receipted. There is a button here that says email the receipt, and it's as easy as saying send the receipt. So again, this process is fluid, meaning Blackbaud's always adding more features to the system. So before you expend a bunch of energy trying to rebuild something that is going to be the bee's knees for your organization, I would encourage everyone on the call to take a close look at the features. And if you want to see what has been coming out recently, if you go into the helplet and you hit the little exclamation point up here, this is going to say what has been released. And you can see, what's recent. And you can see there's a whole laundry list of features that have been rolled out. Just something good to keep in the back of your mind, not to dissuade you from trying, to build something like that through Power Automate or Power Apps. But you may find that Blackbaud has already taken care of it. All right. I wanted to show a couple of other concepts. First of all, the search bar. So there is a search bar. Everyone should know about this. It mimics the behavior of Google, meaning it's a box and you type things into it. Notice if I type in Jim, that's searching the entire database for the word Jim through a bunch of different aspects of your data. It's searching on first name, middle name, last name, nickname, spouse name, address, email, record ID, phone number. It is intended to be very easy to use. This is important because when you start trying to pull data into the Razor's Edge, you want to think about how the Razor's Edge thinks about the search feature, because we want to be able to reflect that through the processes that we're going to build so that we don't, again, reinvent the wheel. Now, what I also wanted to show you is once I get to a record, I could have done on that gift record, I guess, but once I get to a record, there's an anatomy of a page I want you all to be familiar with. So this is a constituent record. This is my record. This is in a sample database. I haven't actually given $1.2 million. I wish that was the case, but this is play data. But when I look at this, there's a header on that record. It's got information present. There are action buttons. I can take care of, changing an alert. I can assignment. I can merge this record, things like that. Down below, I have tiles. Tiles are discrete blocks of data. So a contact information tile, a giving tile, a giving history tile, a constituent summary tile, a timeline. There are dozens of tiles that Blackbaud has already built and that are part of the system. One of the things that we're going to tackle in this workshop series is building a brand new tile. So I wanted to kind of stop for a moment and think about what is a tile. I'm looking at a constituent record. This tile relates to Jim Ballou. It doesn't relate to Zoya, and it doesn't relate to Trevor. It relates to Jim. That means that there's context on this tile. This tile has to understand which record are we looking at. And the way that that is identified is, funny enough, through the URL. So when you look at a URL in your browser, what you're going to see is host.nxt.blackbaud.com. That's just the Blackbaud domain. Then constituent records, and then there's a number and a bunch of gobbledygook, okay? The most important thing you need to think about is that number right there. This happens to be the system record ID for Jim Ballou in this database. Now, there is a lot of other logic built into this. All that gobbledygook at the end is actually my organization identifier in the Blackbaud cloud. So don't be worried that you would accidentally pull up a record from someone else's database. That is physically impossible because of the security systems that we've put in place. So if I want to go to a record, I actually can open up a new browser and type in renxt.blackbaud.com/constituent. I think I do record, type in my ID. That's going to, hopefully, if I did that correctly, attempt to pull up my constituent record. And I goofed there. I probably put in an extra S or something like that. But you can see it's trying to resolve to a record. So keep that in mind, not the error, but the fact that this URL gives you everything you need to know to get to this record. Now, one of the examples we're going to do in, I think, week 3 is we're going to build a gift notification. It's going to be an email digest of the major gifts for the day. And again, there's flexibility in what that means. But the output of that is going to be an email that goes once a day to the director of development or maybe a group of people that says, here are all of the large gifts. Well, by use of that URL, we're going to be able to put a hyperlink onto each gift in that email where they can either go to the donor's record with a click or go to the actual gift with a click. Again, just want to lay this concepts out so that you guys can start thinking about how can I get into the system and how can I use these cool custom tools that we're talking about in this course to make it easier for users to get to the data. Again, a lot of times when we talk to customers and they're saying, man, I really need to get the large gifts in front of this user, the president or the dean or the director of development. A lot of the time it's because that person isn't used to logging into the system. And so if we can put a URL in front of them, who doesn't know how to click on a URL, right? And if I can make it easy and intuitive for them to get the system, then I don't have to push all that data. I just have to send them a link. Again, we'll dig into this as we go. There is one other area that I wanted to focus on, which is especially useful given what we are going to be describing, which is the idea of lists. Now, lists in Razor's Edge NXT are a similar concept to query in the database view. Okay, they're selections, they're audiences, they're groups of records. List is not intended to replace query yet. We're getting there. But list is intended to support the 80-20 rule. 80% of the queries that people typically need out of the Razor's Edge are things like, I need everyone who gave a gift to the annual fund last week. Or I need all of my alumni who haven't given in 5 years. Or I need everyone who is registered for this event. Or I need all the gifts that have been receipted but need a personal acknowledgement because they're over $5,000, right? These are basic common questions. Lists can handle all of those. When I look at a list, the anatomy of a list is essentially what its name describes, right? It's a group of records and it's organized in some way. So when you build lists in the system, you have the ability to set filters, which you'll see across the top. We recently made a change to the way that the filters are organized. We came up with kind of a hot bar. So this little idea here, constituent code, any gift, fundraisers, things like that, those are filters that I use frequently. And I can change them by simply clicking on the filter, and that's going to take me to an area where I can see all of my filters. Once I've chosen my favorite filters, though, then I can simply drop them. So if I wanted to find anybody in the database who has made any gift greater than $1,000, and maybe this month or to a certain fund or campaign, I can apply that, and that's going to produce my list. I can save that list and I can give it a name, and then that, through the connector to the Power Platform, becomes one of the Lego building blocks that I can use to put things together in creative and compelling ways. Now, I forgot to tell you one more thing over here, back on the constituent record. Let me pull my record up again. And I wanted to make sure that I highlight the difference between that record ID, which for my record is 755, and another ID, which you guys are hopefully very familiar with, which is the constituent ID. They are not the same thing. They both refer to the same record, but my constituent ID is 260. My record ID is 755, and I know that because I can see it up here in my URL. Now, how does this relate? We've always had record IDs and system IDs. I just alt-tab back to the database view, and if you open up a constituent record and you look at the properties button, you'll see it all. There's my record ID. It's got my import ID. It's got my constituent ID. It's got other IDs as you might be tracking. But keep in mind that when you think about IDs, the record ID is primarily used for navigation, meaning if I'm going to put it into a URL. The constituent ID is something that I might search by just typing 260, and that's going to pull up my record. Carter Pharmaceuticals has 260 somewhere in its record ID as well. All right, that was a lot to take in, and this is not intended to be training, but I wanted to let you know that there is an architecture behind the scenes that Blackbaud has built. We call this Sky UX for user experience. This idea of tiles, this idea of context. Here's another example. This is a fund record, and I'm going to leave off with this because this fund record not only shows all of the standard tiles that Blackbaud released, but a custom tile. This is a Sky add-in. So Sky add-ins aren't limited, to just constituent records. You can put Sky add-ins anywhere there are tiles, which again can extend the functionality here. This tile is pulling data out of Blackbaud Award Management for scholarship recipients. It was a proof of concept. Now,
I was going to say that's a good reminder, Jim. There's a lot of places where Sky add-ins can go. And while we're going to be focusing on a Sky add-in tile, I just posted in the chat the documentation on Sky add-ins. There's also buttons. There will also soon be tabs. So This is a good concept to, sort of build into your repertoire. And thinking about driving adoption of NXT, if that's the goal, sort of building in these contextual experiences to get people into the system is the way to go. So we'll definitely be covering that in this course. Now we're going to switch gears, and Trevor Kelly is going to get us started on our orientation to the Power Platform, specifically Power Automate.
Great. So what I figured that we could do in the next couple of minutes, or next few minutes, I should say, is just kind of walk through the tools that you're going to be using over the course of the next few weeks. And so where I wanted to start is I brought up the developer website. You can actually get here from the link that Heather just posted within the chat, which was the Sky APIs link. But either way, if you are at developer.blackbaud.com, you can go under the documentation area, and you'll notice that there is a section for the Microsoft Power Platform. Go ahead and click on that. And when you're in here, there is an initial setup area. This is really, really important. You don't have to do it right now. You don't have to do it tomorrow, but within the next couple weeks, if you can go through this initial setup area, we want to make sure that you can connect your Razor's Edge database to the Microsoft Power Platform, because that's what we're going to be using in this course to actually develop and build some of these projects that we're going to be talking about. So if you haven't already done this, go through the first, I think there's 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 different steps, just to make sure that you can get a connection between your Razor's Edge database and the Microsoft Power Platform. My recommendation is if you have multiple Razor's Edge databases, we've worked with a lot of customers that have like a test environment that they use. If you don't have a test environment, we encourage it, we recommend it. You can talk to us about getting one, and we can, work with you to explain how you can secure a test environment. But go ahead and hook it up so that you can actually use the Power Platform with that database. If you don't have a test environment, it's not required for this course. You can just hook up your production environment and we'll make sure that we spell out any caveats when we're doing certain things that might be writing information back to your production environment so that you're not messing with live data. So that's kind of the first thing that I wanted to mention. And again, this isn't something you have to do tomorrow, but preferably within the next week or two, make sure that you've completed these steps and that you can test your connection so that it's hooked up into the Power Platform. So what is the Power Platform? There are two different tools from the Power Platform that we're going to be playing around with in this course. The first is Power Automate, as Heather had mentioned. I'm going to switch over to my Power Automate environment. You can get here by going to flow.microsoft.com. They used to call it Microsoft Flow. They did a whole fun rebranding exercise that confused all of the Microsoft users, and now it's called Power Automate, as Microsoft tends to do sometimes. But that's okay. We'll use Power Automate and Microsoft Flow interchangeably if that's what you're used to. I am on the home screen, right? So notice that the navigation over on the left-hand side allows me to go to different areas of Power Automate. Right now, I'm just on the home area. And yours might look a little different. It looks like somebody sent me an approval request, which I'm not going to do right now. But if I keep scrolling down, let me get rid of some of these pop-ups. If I keep scrolling down, one thing I want to just quickly point out is that right here, there's a popular services area. And notice this number seems to change every time I look at it. There's currently 469 different services that you can connect to with Power Automate or with the Power Platform in general. And this is one of the primary reasons why we decided that we needed to make a Razor's Edge connector to the Power Platform. What this basically means, and I'm actually going to click where it says see all 469 services. This means that we can actually connect Razor's Edge to any one of these platforms that you're seeing here. You'll notice a lot of these include Microsoft tools like Teams and Outlook and Excel and SharePoint and OneDrive and everything else that you might use as part of your Microsoft ecosystem. But it also includes a lot of non-Microsoft tools like Adobe and Smartsheet and Twilio and Facebook and Twitter and all those other ones. And notice as I get maybe a third down the page, one of those connectors is the Blackbaud Razor's Edge. And you can see that little green logo that we're going to be very familiar with as we start building things out here. So that just to, as you start thinking of your ideas, and I know a lot of you had already kind of started coming up with your ideas and submitted your Excel workbooks to us on what you want to build, keep your mind open in terms of what are the different things that you can connect to. You might already have a vendor contract with some of these services that are available. And maybe you can think of ways to streamline or automate some of those processes that might be manual today. So I'm just going to quickly walk through an example just to show you how easy it is to go out and build one of these Power Automate flows. So there are a couple of things that I'll be doing here. I can either go to My Flows, and that's actually going to show me everything that I've already created. You can see in my environment, I've created a lot of different flows. Hopefully by the end of this course, you'll also have a big long list here of things that you've built. I can create a new flow from up here in the My Flows area. There's also a Create button on the navigation on the left-hand side, and I can create a new flow from there. One other thing I want to point out, since we're on this screen in the My Flows area, there's also an import option. And this import option allows you to bring in flows that maybe other people have built and have exported out of their environment so that you can use them. After every single class, starting next week, we will export the class activities that we've been doing. It comes out as a zip file. I'm going to upload those zip files into our Teams folder that Heather was talking about. and then you can import those into your own environment. Reason why we do that is because we want to ensure, maybe it's too difficult to be trying to pay attention to what Jim or I or Zaya is doing or Heather's doing, and you want to just watch, and then you want to play around with it afterwards. This will at least give you a starting point so that if you get completely lost, you can go back in and reference some of the stuff that we're actually doing in class. You're also going to have access to the recordings, the video recordings as well. So again, don't feel like you have to follow along step by step, or if you get lost or frustrated, you can always go back and look at the recording, you can pause it, and then you can leverage the flow that we create in class as a starting point. So if you wanted to import something that we built in class, you would just go to the import button. You would find that zip file that we're going to upload into Teams. And then you're going to take that and upload it into your environment. And just to show you what this looks like, I actually have on my computer. So one of the folks from the last cohort messaged me earlier this week, and she was like, I'm really lost. I can't figure out what's wrong with this flow. And she sent it to me in the zip file. So I went ahead and I uploaded it. It is going to prompt you to choose a few options in here. So her Razor's Edge connection is obviously pointing to a different Razor's Edge than mine is. So I have to go in and choose which Razor's Edge connection I want to link it to. And notice in my environment, I've got 3 different Razor's Edge connections. This is the first time you're connecting to Razor's Edge. There's a create new one right here. And then the other connection that she has in this flow is she's connecting it to Mail. She might have also decided that she wanted to connect to Teams and SharePoint and OneDrive and all these other, and DocuSign maybe. So if I were to import this, I would have to make sure that I connect it to my particular environments for all of those different connections. So those would be the steps that you would take when you import any of the flows that we create in class. Does that make sense? All right. So let's go in and create a new flow. And it's going to give you some options in here. You can use a template. Everything that we create in class, I'm just going to create it from blank. So I'm going to go to this build your own from blank section. And you've got a few options for what you want to do. Most of what we're going to be doing is either an instant cloud flow, which we have to physically push a button in order to make that workflow happen or make that flow happen, or we do a scheduled cloud flow. And that's kind of those nightly processes where, every night at 11 p.m., go ahead and get the gift log of new gifts that were entered today. And anything that's a large gift, go ahead and notify a specific person, or go in and look for any new constituents that were added and maybe send them some sort of welcome email through that flow. So there's a few different options for this scheduled cloud flow that you might want to use. For now, since it's the first time we're actually kind of playing with it, I'm just going to do a one-off ad hoc instant cloud flow. And I'll show you what that looks like. It's going to prompt me for a flow name. We'll call this class 1. And then I'm going to choose this first option, which is manually trigger a flow. When we get deeper into the course, we're going to start talking about Power Apps and how you can trigger a flow to happen when somebody does something within an app. And keep in mind, when we were talking about those Sky add-in tiles, you can actually embed a Power App into a Razor's Edge record, which means when somebody clicks on a button or does something in Razor's Edge, it can trigger a certain set of actions to happen through a workflow. So for now, let me just manually trigger a flow. I'm going to have to hit a button in order for this to do something. I'm going to hit create. And then here's my trigger. I have to actually push the button. And then when you want to connect to something, to a service, you would hit new step. And then you've got your 400 and some odd different services that you can connect to. I've got Excel, I've got the weather, I've got a mail function, I've got Power Apps that I can get to. But if I want to actually get to the Razor's Edge service, I'm just going to type in Blackbaud. You'll notice I've got 3 Blackbaud connectors. 2 of them are custom. In other words, I built these myself. You're probably only going to see one, and it's this first one. It's that green icon that we saw before that we're going to have to be familiar with. So here it is, Blackbaud Razor's Edge. And now notice all the different things that you can do from Power Automate. You can create a constituent. You can create an attachment. You can create a campaign. You can create an action. You can, these are all create GIFs, create custom fields, create event participants. Events is the newest addition that we've made to this connector. So you can start managing events. A lot of folks in this virtual world are doing virtual events. How cool would it be to connect WebEx to a WebEx type of virtual meeting and make sure that you can bring in all the participants into the Razor's Edge, or Teams? We're doing a Teams virtual meeting right now. You can connect that to the events module. You could do things with appeals. So these are all the create options. There's also, if I start typing in get, you can retrieve data from the Razor's Edge. So I can get constituent data, I can get package data, I can get fund data, all those other record operations to read data out of the system. And then there's also the list function. So Jim was just talking about all the different lists that you can create within the WebView. You can leverage that and iterate through that list. So again, if you have a list of gifts that came in today, you could do something like a list gifts, and then you can choose that list that was maybe already created in Razor's Edge. Or you can add different filters or parameters to those lists. So just so we can see this in action, and a really quick example here, because I know I only have a few minutes to show you some of this, I'm going to say, let's get constituent data, right? Get constituent. I'm going to choose this first one, get a constituent. And then the only thing it's asking me is the constituent ID. Now, when it says constituent ID, notice it tells me that this has to be the system record ID of the constituent to get. Can anyone remind me which ID that is? You can put it in the chat or unmute yourself.
It would be the URL one, right?
Yes. So if I were to go into my Razor's Edge, and let's say I want to get information out of Trevor Kelly's record, I'm going to take this ID, 275. And when I go back into my flow, I'm going to say get constituent information from constituent 275. And now, maybe I want to display that. Maybe I want to post that information to a Teams channel. So I'm going to add another new step. And I am going to search for Microsoft Teams. So I'm just going to type in the word team. There it is. And notice, again, I've got a number of different actions that I can do. Instead of in Blackbaud, now it's in Microsoft Teams. So I'm connecting the two. And I apologize, Heather, but I'm going to go ahead and post a message in our class team so that everyone can see it. So it's going to ask me, what team am I going to post a message to? And I've got a lot of teams in my environment. I'm going to see if I can find our Microsoft Power Platform Accelerator team. And we have our April class channel, April 21 class. So I'm going to choose that. And then in the message, what do I want to post? I'm going to post, here's the constituent info. Enter here. Notice what happens over on the right-hand side. When I'm actually in the body of the message, there's a place that holds dynamic content from the previous steps that we've already taken within this flow. So I can say, let's in the message, or in the post to Teams, let's include the name. Let's include their ID, which should be 275 if we did it right. We can do the type of constituent. I think that's going to show whether it's an individual or an organization. And what else? Maybe their primary email. Is email on here somewhere? I thought I had it on here. Here it is, primary email address. And maybe that's all I'm going to post to the team. So if I hit save, let it save for a second. I can now run a test. Notice that there's a test in the upper right. When I click on that, I'm going to say go ahead and manually run the flow. You can also do an automatic. If you've been running this a few times, you can choose a trigger that was used in the past. I'm just going to manually run it since all it requires is a push of the button. It's going to make sure that I'm connected to the Razor's Edge and Microsoft Teams. Again, if you don't already have a Razor's Edge connection, it's going to force you to go in and add a new connection. And that's where it's going to ask you to log into your Razor's Edge environment. Same thing with Teams. If you're not already logged in, which you should be, it's going to prompt you to log into a Teams environment. So let me hit continue and see if this actually works. I'll hit run flow. And then it's telling me that it successfully started. I can hit done, and it's actually going to take me to the process. And these green check marks are a good sign. Basically told me that it went in and it got the constituent.
Trevor, we didn't switch to the screen. It's still on the run flow with the done button. There.
Okay. So I got my green check boxes, which is good. It said that it got the constituent. It told me that it posted to Teams. If I actually go into the team, I'm just going to spot check, make sure that that got posted. Somebody else can probably look as well. But I see it. I see somebody liked it.
We can't see your screen, but I can see it in my Teams.
Awesome. And that's basically how easy it is to do very simple, retrieval of Razor's Edge data, and then use, some of the other apps that are available, and actually getting some sort of data out of it. And again, I could go in and create a constituent from the Power Platform as well. I can update constituent information, update an address. So all those things are possible, and we're going to be diving pretty deep into this over the course of the next 7 weeks.
Thoughts, questions, concerns?
This is Francis. I have a question, and with the Power, with the connectors, with the Power Automate connectors, is there a way to restrict access or like security access to those types of connectors, or is there a built-in feature that does not allow every user to use some of those connectors? I'm just thinking in the context of security and those types of things like that. Is there anything like that? And like I said, you may have said that and I missed it. I'm sorry.
No, I didn't say it, and it's a really good question, because when I went in, again, and I set up my connection here, when I added this action, and again, the first time you add an action, it's going to ask you to log into the Razor's Edge with your credentials. So whoever's logged in, I chose the wrong one here. Whoever's logged into Razor's Edge and is connected to Razor's Edge, it's going to use their credentials as if they are actually using the front end, using the front user experience with the web view. So if they don't have permission to see certain things or update certain things or create records, they're going to get an error when they try to run that flow. So it is based off of whoever is actually running the flow, and it inherits the standard out-of-the-box security roles that you already have with the Razor's Edge NXT. So each individual user that's using Flow or Power Automate is going to be authenticated, and it's as if they are the ones that are creating records, modifying records, etc.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
I think as we move into sort of the Power Apps and the Sky add-ins, there's additional credentials and keys and other elements that you're going to need to be able to deploy those, and those can be governed by security as well. So it's a good question, and we'll try to make a point of reiterating where those sorts of governance or security concerns or change management concerns come into play as we go through the course. So thank you for that question. I see a few other hands up here. Austin, did you have a question?
Yes, it's more of like a best practices kind of thing. So if the flow is running, any flow I build runs as if it's me either pulling data out or putting data back into our system, would it be beneficial to create an alternative login so that you could query on whatever data is added through a flow, or put in a custom field or something to be able to do that?
I think it depends on what kind of flow that you're creating. In a lot of cases, it's beneficial to understand who is the user that triggered that flow, so that you can look at it from audit purposes. Who created this record? I think it depends on, really just the specific project or the use case that you're trying to accomplish. We have seen some other organizations develop like an API user, and some of the automated flows are just run by that API user, which is completely up to you if that's something that you want to do.
Thanks.
Amy?
Is there a way to copy flows if someone leaves so that it could go to another user if you wanted to continue to use it, if you deactivated the user's account?
So you can certainly share your flows with other users. If I click the share button, I can say that I want to add other users as owners of this. So if I'm about to leave the organization, I'd probably make sure that I share this with Heather and Jim and Zaya so that they can continue to maintain it after I leave the organization.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to guess that your Microsoft administrator probably has a higher level of rights to be able to monitor everything that's being built. And something to know, sort of as soon as you share it, correct me if I'm wrong, Trevor, it will disappear from my flows and go under to my org flows. Is that right? That might be something we want to show quickly too, because people lose their work. Yeah,
it goes from cloud flows to shared with me. So these are all of the flows that have, I'm a co-owner versus it's just my flow. So if you think that you lost it, you might want to check some of these other tabs to see if you can retrieve it. One other quick thing before we move on to a different topic. I mentioned that for this particular example, I'm saying that I'm manually triggering the flow. In other words, I have to push a button in order to make this happen. You could also, I'm going to delete this and just kind of talk about, because next week we're going to talk about other types of triggers. Specifically, if you wanted to trigger this flow to happen when a user submits a form, for example, I can connect this to Microsoft Forms. And I can basically say when a user responds to a Microsoft form, and it's going to ask me which form, maybe then I want it to go through these steps. You could also do other types of triggers, like notice that SharePoint has some triggers. When a new file is added to a SharePoint folder or a new item is added to a SharePoint list, you can make that the trigger that starts off that flow, that basically makes that flow run. There's, when you receive an email. So you can say anytime you receive an email to a shared inbox, you can use Office 365 as the trigger and basically say when a new email arrives in the shared inbox, then we want this flow to run. A really good example, I think we talked about this in the orientation, was another organization wanted to manage all of the unsubscribe emails that they were getting. And basically they had a shared folder set up where anytime somebody emails that folder, it goes in and it adds a solicit code to their record, because that's the unsubscribe folder. That's the unsubscribe mailbox. And when people email that saying that they don't want to receive any more messages, it triggers a flow to basically mark their record as do not solicit or do not email. So just a lot of different kind of things that you might want to look at and play around with. in terms of the triggers and things that you can actually build your flows to run when something happens in one of these applications.
So we want to start talking about your project ideas. So want to get into a little bit of an idea workshop and thank those of you that have already been sharing your ideas in teams. A lot of you have gift notifications or gift digest or gift reports as part of your ideas, and those are excellent. And we are going to learn how to do that and follow along with Trevor in workshop 3. So, and from that, you might want to build in greater sophistication into what we build in class based on your own business rules. Like if you want to include the fund description, or you want to have a different refinement or criteria for the types of gifts. Or you want to actually have the notification happen in Teams versus Outlook versus Gmail. So there are opportunities to build on what we have in class. But we hope that you can start sort of thinking outside the box as far as other suitable automation projects. It's helpful to think about what are, some of the most mundane tasks that take up your time, because our hope is that you're going to be able to take some of these mundane but time-consuming tasks off your plate so that you can focus more time and energy on wider, broader, more impactful automation projects. So, Zalia, I know that you've been really helping our organization and our customers thinking about suitable projects for the Power Platform. So why don't I let you guide us through the next couple topics?
That works. Thank you so much. To piggy off of what Heather just stated, the first question that we see here about those automation projects is, how will that project fulfill your organization's mission? Speaking for myself, and early on when Power Platform was introduced, some users were identifying automations and capabilities that met one or two individuals' needs. And the goal here is to make sure that we are supporting our organization's missions with the automations. It's great to start with those smaller projects and then make sure that they align with capabilities that are outside of what Razor's Edge NXT is already offering. So some of those questions are, will it reduce human error? Reducing manual work. So if there are activities that you complete, I think one example that was provided in orientation had to do with proposals and automating an approval process. So you may have workflows that are already defined and taking place outside of your solution that the Power Platform Accelerator program will help you identify and automate.
Are there anybody who is thinking about, I think we have a few minutes, right? Anybody thinking about a project that isn't a notification or a report, and sort of just want to bring that to our group and talk about it for a minute?
Sure. So I've got a couple to help with sort of the mundane part of data entry. So we have outside forms on Cognito, which is one of the linked applications into Microsoft Flow or Power Automate. Microsoft rebranding things has really gotten me confused. But I've built flows already from Cognito into OneNote, OneDrive, Excel tables so that we could see those entries very easily. But I would like to expand on that so we have like a form where people can update their communication preferences. And I would like to build out a conditional flow to create or update their contact information on records. And if a record needs to be added, that there's a review process in there as well.
Oh my gosh, Austin, bless your soul for that segue. Because next week we're here for you. We're not going to look at Cognito. We're going to be with Microsoft Forms because everybody will have access to that, but the concepts will be the same. And something you're going to hear us say a lot, and starting next week, is you got to teach the robot, right? That's essentially what building a flow is. You have to teach a robot to do your job. So you have to start thinking about what are all of the little micro steps, even sort of the way that human cognition works behind the scenes, right? And sort of teach that business logic to the robot. So homework. Next week, we're going to be talking about sort of that data capture through a form, and then how you would evaluate whether that constituent already resides in Razor's Edge NXT. Maybe they have duplicates. Maybe they don't reside in NXT. What are your standard operating procedures? What does that look like for your organization? How do you prevent duplicate detection? How and who do you let create records in the system? What are the fields and tags that have to be attached to that record? So this isn't necessarily something that you need to post within your folder, unless that would be useful for you. Bullet points are fine, but start thinking about that, because we're going to give you sort of a template to work off of for next week for Jim's session. But think about what that means for your organization, because everyone's a little bit different. And we're also going to be posting in the week 1 folder a flow template. So one of those zip files, and Trevor walked through how you would import that into your environment. So we want you to practice bringing that into your environment. And if you have any issues doing that, please just sort of ping us on Teams, and we can help you overcome that. So for next week, we're going to sort of dig in on how we teach the robot, right? How do we think like business analysts, and think about how we build out business logic? And then we're going to start building flows in Power Automate. And it's going to be sort of our 101 session. We hope that you'll have those dual screens and you would be able to follow along with us. So we hope that today was valuable for you.